Two of the best centers in the high school class of 2025 are considering Indiana basketball for their next home. But the question is, are they future Hoosiers?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, thank you so much for being here again, making this your first listen every single day. Shout out to my everydayers, those of you that come back every day and truly make this a part of your rotation, whether you're on audio, whether you're on video. Thank you so much for being here. You are the reason this podcast is so successful. Two of the best centers in the high school class of 2025 for basketball are considering Indiana. Have offers. One of them has Indiana in their top 8. We're talking about both guys today, Cenac and Malachi Moreno, okay? Two of legitimately the best centers in the country. And I'm asking the question and I'm answering the question, giving you my thoughts on are they or could they end up at Indiana? Talking about both of those guys today, plus football recruiting. We got to get caught up on that because there's a ton of news from head coach Curt Cignetti and what this staff has done as the month of June winds down and the dead period begins. So that's what's on the show today. I want to start with Cenac, a guy that has really just begun to get tons and tons and tons of offers, right? He was a guy that was extremely talented, was a little underrated to get things going in the class of 2025, but he ended up with some really big offers before the spring, right? He had programs like LSU were on him. You had programs like Memphis, Houston, Auburn were in there as well. They had already offered him. Then all of a sudden, over the last few months, since his high school season got wrapped up and since he's been playing on some of these circuits and everything, everybody and their mother has been on Cenac, including Mike Woodson and the Indiana Hoosiers. Listen to these programs that have since offered Cenac, who, according to 247, is the number one center in the class. He's a top 15 player pretty much wherever you look in 2025. Listen to some of these, okay? UCLA, Michigan, Texas, Kentucky, Arkansas, Kansas, UConn, and yes, Indiana. So sure, he had some good offers from Houston and Auburn, but then the big boys showed up and said, okay, we're good. We're ready. Let's go. We want you to be an Indiana Hoosier. And Cenac's a phenomenal player. If you've watched this guy play and seen any of his films, 6'10", 230 pounds. He's every bit of it out of Branson, Missouri. This guy is unbelievable, and he continues to work on his game. He continues to be in the gym. He's always working out. He's always practicing. He's always trying to get better. And he spoke on a couple of schools that he's interested in, Houston, LSU, since they were on him early. But here's a quote that he said. He says, quote, "It has been kind of a hectic period, but it has given me a lot of confidence and the drive to just work harder and push harder." He says, "I'm blessed to have those offers and things like that, but I'm still focused on getting better and making it my main goal." That's a quote from 247. Just talking about where he's always just working on his game and trying to get better and playing in all these different tournaments. And look, the guy can do it all. We use the word versatile a lot. We use that a ton for guys like him, but he can literally do it all. His offensive rebounding is phenomenal. His athleticism is fantastic. He runs the floor really, really well. We're going to talk about that too with Malachi Moreno coming up in the second segment on the show today. But Cenac is, again, he's considered the number one center in the class. Everybody wants a piece of him. And for Indiana, the reason we're talking about centers today is because look at what the center position becomes starting next year. You don't have, I mean, you're kind of in the dark right now. You're kind of left wondering what's going to happen, what you're going to get, whether you go and get somebody like Chris Cenac or Malachi Moreno, or whether you add through the transfer portal like you've done the last couple of years. Hey, it worked out, right? Khalil Ware is going to be drafted this week, and I think Umar Ballo is going to be fantastic and could be right up there with him. But you've got to start thinking about the future of this roster if you're Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers, and you're still looking for commits in that 2025 class. Yes, it's a little early, but you're still looking to build some momentum, because out of all these guys we've talked about, Cenac, Moreno, Mullins, Sisley, Harrelson, like, you have to land some of these guys. And Chris Cenac's going to be that's a tough ask. I'll just be honest with you. Indiana's there. They've got an offer on the table, but I think it's going to be tough for Indiana to land Chris Cenac. And this goes without saying, but you're not going to get Chris Cenac and Malachi Moreno. I think we can both and all agree on that. And I'm excited to talk about Moreno coming up in a few minutes, but you've got to get one. You have to get your center of the future. And I think either one of these guys could be that. Chris Cenac is the number one center. Malachi Moreno, according to 247, is the number 3 or 2 center, depending on where you look. So you're in good hands with both of these guys. You're in a good spot with both of them, and you will not complain on either one that you get. I think they're very similar in terms of their game and how they play offensively and defensively. But the fact that the Hoosiers are going after them, I love it, man. I absolutely love that this staff doesn't care. They're not scared. They're not worried. Who cares that Auburn and Houston and UConn and Texas and Kansas have all offered this guy? They don't care. They don't care. We're going after them and say, we want you. We believe you can be here. And if Indiana starts putting some results on the floor this winter and this coming spring in the 24-25 season, that's going to lead, I think, to a lot of success in recruiting down the road. Whether it be this class or 26 or beyond, winning cures all. Winning is what these guys want to see. They want proof of concept. They want to know that what Mike Woodson is selling them is going to work in the future, and that it's going to work for them specifically to get them to the next level. So that's what they're looking for. You're telling me, believe me, Chris Cenac wants to see some results. Malachi Moreno wants to see some results. They just want to make sure it's going to work. Now, results in terms of centers has been there. Again, Khalil Ware is being drafted this week, ladies and gentlemen, and I think Umar Ballo could do the same thing. So that gives the Hoosiers an edge. They have something to offer right now. And you better believe that Mike Woodson is in their ear telling them, hey, did you watch the draft? Be sure you watch the draft. We're going to have a guy go. He plays your position. Be sure you watch the draft this week. Hey, did you see that? Did you see him on TV? Did you see him be a lottery pick? Right? All those things are how recruiting works. And that's how you go after a guy like Chris Cenac, who has offers from all the biggest places in the country. He's not the only one, though. Malachi Moreno, who is a top 3 center in the country, still a top 20 player across this United States. We're talking about him coming up next because he has Indiana in his top 8. We're talking Malachi Moreno coming up next here on Locked on Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked on Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs are wrapped up, right? NBA's done. Hockey just got done last night. Congrats to the Florida Panthers taking out Edmonton. What a heck of a series that was. The odds shifted like crazy. Florida was a huge favorite. They were up 3-0. Edmonton stormed all the way back, and they were pretty much a coin flip last night in Game 7, so that was a lot of fun. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, right? And the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whatever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, thank you so much for making Locked on Hoosiers your first listen each and every day. We continue on here on the Tuesday edition of the show. Reminder, we are in off-season mode, so we're going 3 to 4 days a week. This week will be 3, all right? Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'm out of town Thursday, Friday, and the weekend for a bachelor trip, but I will be back early next week, so keep that in mind. If you're here on YouTube watching me right now, be sure you like the video, comment down below on which center you think Indiana should go after, Cenac, Malachi Moreno, or which one you think they'll get. And then also be sure you subscribe to our channel. We continue to grow. Live counter as we record. I do this every day for you. 2,652. So thank you so much for that. Be sure you become one of our subscribers on YouTube. If you're on audio, do the same thing. Subscribe to it, follow it, do whatever you got to do so you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Well, we talked a lot about Cenac, who is the #1 center in the country, but this guy's right on his tail, and Malachi Moreno is a heck of a star. All right, he is 7 foot tall. They say, some places say 6'11". We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's 7 foot tall, 230 pounds. So just compare them real quick. This guy, Moreno's got a couple more inches on Cenac, but weight-wise, they're about the same. And when you watch them play, they look pretty much the same. And Malachi Moreno, this kid can ball. He can absolutely play. And here's what's fascinating about both of these kids. You've got Cenac from Missouri, and you've got Moreno from Kentucky. So you've got the Hoosiers going outside of our state, which we know we're going after the biggest players in the state, but going after some of the best players in other states as well, especially Kentucky, which I love. I love going into the Bluegrass State and trying to pick up a couple of big-time players and not let Louisville or Kentucky land them, especially with all the confusion and craziness going on down there. But Malachi Moreno has officially put Indiana in his top 8. He did it early this week, and here's the list. No particular order. All right, this is the list that he has cut it down to for Malachi Moreno, who, again, is, according to 247, the #1 player in Kentucky, the #3 center in the country, and a top 25 player. He cut his list down to the likes of Ohio State, North Carolina, Iowa, Louisville, Indiana, Arkansas, Notre Dame, and Kentucky. So interesting schools in there. You've got the big dogs, right? You've got Kentucky and Indiana, North Carolina. You've got those in there. And then you've got some that are a little questionable. Notre Dame, right? Ohio State trying to get back in business. Iowa, Louisville, right? Trying to get them maybe back up and running for a Louisville program that I still don't have answers for. I still have no idea what the heck has been going on down there. Arkansas, right? So you've got John Calipari there. You've got Mark Pope at Kentucky trying to get him. I'm sure Calipari has been on Moreno when he was in Lexington. So there's a lot to break down here, but Indiana's in the top 8. You know what that means? Means you have a chance. Means you have a shot. And I absolutely think that the Hoosiers have a shot here because Moreno is a baller, okay? This guy can play. And you go and you start watching some of his film, and look, On3 has him as the #1 center in the country. So you can kind of swing this and spin this however you want to. The guy can play. I think he's still young. I think he's still a little raw, but I think he's got all the potential in the world. Again, he's 7 foot freaking tall, man. You're going to be good at basketball if you're that tall. Put on a little weight, and he's going to be just fine. I look at him like a Khalil Ware. That's what I compare him to, is a Khalil Ware, because of how he plays, how he runs the floor, how he cleans up the glass, how he really is just always in the right spot. That's the thing I've noticed with Malachi Moreno is he's always where he's supposed to be. Whether he's on the opposite block and he makes that backdoor cut on the baseline, bam, there he is. And of course, he barely has to jump to dunk the basketball. Whether he is setting the pick and roll and he just knows exactly where to roll. You don't go to the same place every time, and he knows exactly where to go. Same thing in transition too. Well, he's not the fastest guy, but he does get on his horse and go. And he knows exactly where to be in transition. Ball's on one side, he runs to the other. He'll come around the defender, they'll throw it up, alley-oop, and bam, there he is, slam, bam, damn, and he throws it down, okay? He knows how to play the game. And his post moves are good, but can be better. That's something I noticed a little bit. That's where I was talking about him being a little raw here, is I think he can still get better. And I think he will. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's not going to be playing college basketball for another, oh goodness, trying to do math on the fly, 16 months. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. The 2025 class that won't be playing until November. So he has a lot of time to continue to work on his game. Same way Cenac talks Moreno's doing the same thing and trying to get better. And he plays on the Adidas circuit for the AAU guys, plays for the Indiana Elite, right? He plays with Braylon Mullins and Trent Sisley. So you have that going for you. You've got all three of these guys who have been talking to one another. Hey, maybe we could go to Indiana. Maybe we should check Indiana out, right? That has to help you here, which is why I personally feel that out of these two centers, Cenac and Moreno, I think you land Moreno before you land Cenac. I think there's a better chance you get Malachi Moreno to become an Indiana Hoosier than I do Chris Cenac. And I just think because of the relationships, because of the closeness, right? You're also talking Chris Cenac from Missouri. He's got big boy programs, and Moreno does too, but I think you have a better relationship. Indiana has a better relationship with Moreno right now than they do with Chris Cenac. You'd love to get either one. Again, you're not going to complain either way, but I do think Moreno is a more realistic choice, a realistic option, a realistic thing that Indiana could land him in this class of 2025. Could you imagine if Braylon Mullins, Trent Sisley, and Malachi Moreno all decide to commit to the Indiana Hoosiers and become Hoosiers for the 2025 season? I don't think it's out of the question. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's preposterous to bring that up and have that thought in our brains. I think it's very possible. That's a hard ask. That's a very, very, very hard task to do, but I think it can be done. And I believe that if anybody can do it, it's Mike Woodson and Indiana. You're talking about two kids from the state trying to pull one more with them from Kentucky, and they all play on the same AAU team. They're traveling together. They're playing together. They're talking together. And if you haven't noticed, that Indiana Elite team is just beating people, man. They're beating them down bad. You're telling me that when they're out there winning and dropping 20 points each and they're winning by 40, you're telling me that they don't have some thoughts and conversations about, man, we could do this at the next level. We could do this in college. Think about how cool that would be. Those conversations are being had. And if you are Indiana and Mike Woodson, you better push into that as hard as you can, man. That better be the go-to recruiting pitch for all three of these guys. Yeah, look, why don't you guys just come up together? Why don't you guys just do what you're doing now, but on a bigger scale? Come do it inside of historic Assembly Hall. Come dominate the Big Ten, and let's compete for a championship. Because I think that's a possibility. I think if those three guys come here, the Hoosiers are competing for a championship. Hell, I think they compete for a championship this year in the 24 season. But you start bringing in 3 or 4 big-time recruits in that 2025 class, then you're really talking. Then you've got something. And I think that's where Indiana stands right now. Chris Cenac from Missouri, Malachi Moreno from Kentucky. Both are two of the best centers in the class of 2025, and the Hoosiers are all up in it. I just think Moreno's got a better chance than you do of landing Chris Cenac. Well, coming up in our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, we got to get caught up on football because, oh my goodness, Curt Cignetti and his crew are killing it. They're crushing it in recruiting. The month of June has been very good to that program. We'll talk about that in our final segment coming up next on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, appreciate you being a part of the Tuesday edition of the show. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe on YouTube, do the same on your audio platform. Wouldn't want you to miss a brand new episode of Locked On Hoosiers. You'll get notified each and every time that I post a new one, which this week will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, back early next week here in off-season mode. I'll be out of town for a bachelor trip. But we've got to talk some football, okay? I know we've talked a lot of basketball here recently, but Indiana football recruiting, have you noticed what's happening here in Bloomington? Have you seen what's going on over at the football facility and what new head coach Curt Cignetti has been doing? Because it needs to be talked about, okay? How about this? In the month of June, all right, and we still have a few days left of June, but the dead period's here. We'll talk about that in a second. In the month of June, in the class of 2025, Curt Cignetti, his entire staff, and Indiana football have added 9 recruits to the 2025 class in this month alone. That's talking about big-time players like Zachary Smith and Tristan Abram, guys that are difference makers for this program, players that this program just hasn't been bringing in over the last few years. And this is huge. I mean, I cannot express how big this month has been. And I'll be honest, we have not talked about it a ton because I've just been kind of waiting to see where this thing goes and see how this thing is going to build. And they just kept coming. I was like, all right, maybe they're done. But then I'd hear something like, really? And then bam, it would drop. And then bam, it would drop. And then another one, right? 9 players added in the 2025 class in the month of June, man. That is really, really exciting. And look, I think that there could be a couple more coming down the pipe this week. So keep that in mind too. I don't think we're done. I think we're adding more this week, even though it is the dead period. And what that is, for those of you that may not know, the recruiting dead period started yesterday on June 24th. It will run through July 24th. And it's the dead period, right? Players cannot officially visit. Coaches cannot go and see them. You can't go talk to them. You can't do any of that. It's the dead period. Everything stalls and is done. Doesn't mean a kid can't commit. If he wants to commit during the dead period, he's more than welcome to. If he wants to take an unofficial and just happen to show up and look around, that's fine. You can't do anything. You can't talk with coaches. You can't be a part of all of that. So really, you can't. So all of that is out the window. You can't do any of that. It's the dead period. But again, doesn't mean you can't commit. It doesn't mean that you can't decide on your future right now. And look, I think that there are going to be a couple of more coming down the pipe this week, and I think there's more coming down the pipe later on as well. What that allows for, end of July, that's a heavy recruiting time because a lot of programs do their big recruiting events that weekend, right? Try to bring in everybody that you can and just have a big time, bring in the families and do big events and things like that. Because once August is here, fall practice starts. And at that point, Curt Cignetti and his staff, you ain't got time to go out and see kids, and bringing them in on visits, it's a lot more difficult too. You'll do that throughout the season, right? You'll bring guys in for big games here in Indiana and things like that. But that last weekend of July, keep an eye on that one too. That's where a lot of big time commitments go down, and you still have the whole fall. But I've told you this, it's a growing trend where kids nowadays, man, basketball, football, anything, they're ready to get their commitment done and out of the way before their season starts. And so with high school football getting going in August in most places, September and some, they're ready to get that done. They don't want to deal with the recruiting talk during their high school season because the 25 class is going into their senior year of high school. And they're ready to have it done. They're at Indiana commit. They're at Ohio State commit. They're at a Houston commit, whatever the case may be. And then they just play their senior season. They don't have to worry about, hey, where are you going? Hey, have you decided yet? Hey, have you heard from this coach? Have you been here? Blah, 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 blah. No, they don't want to deal with that anymore. They just want to be committed and then play their senior season. And look, I don't blame them. I'd be the exact same way. And so that's what Indiana is looking for here in the next few weeks and in the end of July and even early August too. If if that's what it takes. But you start looking at what the Hoosiers have brought in. Tristan Abram is a 3-star edge, 6'4", 225 pounds out of St. Louis. Memphis was on him hard. Kansas State was on him hard. And the Hoosiers came in and were able to get a big win there. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, 3-star, that's not very good. That's false. I think Tristan Abram is going to be a stud. I think he's only going to get better. And he is an underrated player in the class. I really do believe that. And you know what? Here's what I'll say too. We don't have the luxury to be picky. Indiana doesn't have that luxury. We are nowhere close to having that luxury. So if a 3-star Tristan Abram at the edge spot, a defensive side of the football that needs all the help it can get, if he wants to come here, let him. Let him come here. Indiana wanted him. You should want him. He's a really good player. I don't care if they're a 2-star. I don't care if they're unranked. If they want to come here, let them come. And if Curt Cignetti and this staff want them, I trust them in their opinion and their take on these kids and their judgment on bringing in the right players, because I think they've done that so far. I know we haven't seen anything on the field, but I'm trusting them in what they're doing in recruiting. And the month of June has been phenomenal. I don't think they're done, and I think the 2025 class still has a long way to go, but you need to take notice of what's happening with Curt Cignetti and this staff. It's time to be excited. It's time to buy in. It's time to give this staff and this head coach all of your support for Indiana football. They're doing the right things. Will it work out in the end? I don't know. Only time will tell. But I think they're doing the correct things in recruiting, off the field, practicing, workouts, everything like that. They're doing the right things and building it the right way. All we have to see now is if they can continue to do that and if it's going to work. And I think your support for that will go a long way. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. I appreciate you, man. I really do. I appreciate you all being here, making this your first listen each and every day. Again, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Just hit our logo, hit the subscribe button. You'll get notified every time that we post a new episode. Comment down below. All right, comment on the centers, comment on football. What are you excited about for football season? I want to hear from you. Also, if you're on audio, follow us there, subscribe, turn on notifications. That way, you'll know every time we post a new episode. We will be back tomorrow, all right? So be sure you're tuning in tomorrow for Locked On Hoosiers. Until then, Hoosier fans, stay safe. I'll talk to you later.